out on this busy day to join us for our news conference. I'm Peter Baines. I'm the Executive Director of the New York Conference of Mayors. I have with me today Tim Creamer, who's the Executive Director of the New York State School Boards Association. Steve Aquario is the Executive Director of the New York State Association of Counties. And from the New York State Association of Towns, we have Lori Mithen, who is their General Counsel. We're here today in a unified fashion to talk about property tax relief and shared services and what we believe is the best approach to achieving property tax relief going forward for this state. We fully support the intent of the governor's tax freeze proposal, and I believe all New Yorkers do, but we are concerned that in its current form there are aspects of it that are unworkable, that are flawed, and therefore will not achieve the property tax relief that we all would like to see. What we're going to do today is I'm going to have Tim Creamer speak next. He's going to talk a bit about our concerns with the tax freeze plan. I then am going to discuss an alternative concept that we've developed that we'd like to flesh out for you today. And then Steve Aquario will talk a little bit about mandate relief, and even more importantly, in terms of being newsworthy, an initiative that we jointly, the four associations, are going to begin and announce today having to do with shared services. So with that, I will turn the mic over to Tim Creamer.
Thank you, Peter. My role here is to kind of explain a little bit about what this tax cap freeze and efficiency savings program is all about. Please allow me to talk in a little bit of detail on that. I don't know what all you know about it, so I'll just give you a little overview on that, but then talk about some of the drawbacks to the plan as we see it and lay out in a general sense what our recommendations are before I turn it over to Steve, who will go into detail on that. A basic overview of this freeze proposal as proposed by the governor would give property taxpayers a personal income tax credit for increases in their property tax bills for the next 2 years, subject to two conditions. In 2014 and 15, the jurisdiction, the taxing jurisdiction, be it a school district, be it a municipality, has to stay within their property tax cap. If they stay within their property tax cap and that budget is passed, then the voters within that jurisdiction are going to be getting a rebate of some sort equal to the increase in their taxes from year 1 to year 2. In the second year, those same taxpayers will get a tax rebate if the taxing jurisdiction stays within the cap, and this is important, and the taxing jurisdiction develops some sort of a efficiency plan that is going to show how, in the aggregate, a number of jurisdictions within a county, within a region, are going to share or consolidate services and eliminate duplication and overlap. This is what the governor refers to as an efficiency plan. So that's year 1 and 2, the freeze, if you will. Then you move into 3 years where this efficiency plan is put into place. In 2016 and 17, the efficiency plan must achieve aggregate savings of at least 1% of the entire total tax levy for all the jurisdictions within this plan. And if you fail to achieve that 1% of the plan savings, state aid could be withheld from those jurisdictions. It requires a huge amount of trust and cooperation among these jurisdictions to achieve that. Year number 2, you have this efficiency plan continuing on, and now those same jurisdictions are going to have to achieve aggregate savings of at least 2% of the entire total tax levy for all the jurisdictions in the plan. Then you move on to 2018 and 19. The efficiency plan must achieve aggregate savings of at least 3% of the entire total levy for all of the jurisdictions in the plan. And also a part of this proposal, there's a property tax credit, circuit breaker that is phased in beginning in 2014 and phases in over time, achieving higher levels of penetration. So that's a basic overview. I know it's a lot of detail. We could explain that more, but that's as simple as I can get at this point in time. Which brings us to some of the drawbacks of what we believe this plan offers. And one of them is we find it to be very, very complex. We think administratively it could be very costly. And for us, who have studied this pretty closely, it leaves many unanswered questions. It does not credit existing consolidations and collaborations among local governments. This right here is just an example of what we've gathered to date of the types, the number of consolidations, cost-sharing projects, collaborations that are taking place right now among school districts, municipalities, counties, towns, villages, right here. This is just a start. We're going to be gathering more and more of this information. This plan, as proposed, does not clearly state how service sharing between, let's say, school districts and municipalities will be credited. It clearly states that school districts work together. It clearly states that municipalities work together. But what we hear all the time is, wouldn't it be great if school districts and municipalities could share services? This does not make it clear as to how any of those kind of projects would be credited towards this efficiency plan. We believe it ignores crediting those taxpayers who live in communities that, quite honestly, have already exhausted most of their cost containment options. We have a lot of school districts, we have a lot of municipalities that have been cutting for years, to the point that they would tell you right now, for you to come to us and say, we need to freeze your cap, and then we need to cut your levy 1%, 2%, 3%, we don't know where we're going to get that. We don't know how we're going to do that. You start doing that, we're going to have to make drastic budget cuts, and when we make drastic budget cuts in these already lean budgets, it's going to mean layoffs, and layoffs means higher unemployment in this state. It's a top-down approach that this freeze proposal and efficiency plan proposal bring to us. The targets of 1%, 2%, 3%, very arbitrary, and we think could lead to some unintended consequences, such as there might be some implementation delays. There's projects like this that are on the books, ready to go, and all of a sudden, you're not going to get credit for those until year 3. What's the hurry? Perhaps we'll just delay what we're going to do and those things that are already on the drawing board. It could further incentivize governments to increase their tax levy right to the cap, even if they weren't planning to do so. Now, in most school districts, where the cap is only 1.46%, it's not a huge threat of this part. But there could be places where they weren't planning to go all the way to the cap. Now they might as well, because it's going to be picked up. We also have found that consolidations, in the research we've done, consolidations do not produce quick savings. Communities in 8 out of 10 school districts this last year alone have voted down school district mergers. What we have found is a few bucks on the table is not something to entice most of the taxpayers and the voters. What they say is, if you can expand the program, we might be interested. But a few bucks savings or a few bucks in my pocket probably is not going to do that. Before I turn it over to Steve, I want you to tell you that our recommendations in a very generalized sense are we need to have adequate state aid in order to make this sort of a plan work. You can't just cut your way into prosperity. We're going to need to have meaningful mandate relief. You hear this from us all the time. We really have not achieved that yet. We really need some help in that regard. You're going to hear from Peter, who's going to talk about what we believe to be a much more clean, simple approach to this freeze rebate proposal. And you'll also hear about what we're calling a municipal innovation exchange that is going to have our four organizations working together and finding ways to achieve those cost savings, those shared services that the governor would want us to do. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thanks, Tim. I'm now going to talk a bit about this conceptual proposal we have that we think will provide property tax relief much more simply, much more directly, in a less circuitous, bureaucratically intensive fashion than the tax freeze would. We have a chart up here that I'm going to go through as a way of highlighting the differences between our proposals. We have a 8.5 by 11 copy for everybody in the back as well, if you don't already have it. Fundamentally, we believe the freeze and what we're talking about today are the same in terms of their intent. They are both what we consider bold initiatives to provide much needed short-term property tax relief. From that point, though, forward, as you look at the two proposals, we see important differences. What our proposal is in conceptual form basically is, rather than, does it really make sense for a property taxpayer to have to pay increased taxes and then await weeks, months, sometimes almost a year later to get a rebate back from the state? It may or may not be the right amount. If it is, why do they have to float this money for government and then wait to get it back? So we tried to come up with an idea, a concept that would not have that burden on the taxpayer to upfront additional taxes. If it's really going to be a freeze, let's freeze taxes. So our basic concept is, for any local government or school district that decides locally within their community that, yes, we are going to keep our levy at the cap this year, there should be a partnership between them and the state. And for the local government or the school staying at the cap, in return, the state would make a payment to them that they would then, that the local government or school district would have to use toward further reduction in the property tax levy. Therefore, and if the amount is sufficient, it could bring the levy from a capped amount to a zero increase in the levy. Therefore, the local government or the school district, they don't increase taxes on that a residential taxpayer I talked about. That taxpayer doesn't have to wait, doesn't have to pay more, wait to get it back later. That's the general concept. Why don't we collaborate between the state and the local government, make a payment to the local governments that have fought hard and made the sacrifices, oftentimes through shared services, but let the local government decide how they're going to get to that cap if that's what they want to do. In terms of how we think our plan or our concept would work better than the tax freeze plan, I think obviously ours is simpler to administer. Local government stays at the cap, local government gets the payment, whatever that payment may be based on what the governor and the legislature determine the formula to be. The taxpayers would get immediate relief. They wouldn't get contingent relief where they have to pay the tax, wait to receive the taxes back. One part of the tax freeze that hasn't been discussed much is small business does not receive any benefit from the tax freeze. And actually, in a way, they are harmed because of what Tim said. The incentive with the tax freeze could be for local government to, hey, let's raise our taxes to the cap, knowing that our residents are going to get all the taxes back as a rebate. However, businesses do not get the rebate. So, in essence, a business could be hurt under the tax freeze. Under our plan, because if it works as discussed, taxes would not go up. Residents wouldn't have to front any taxes. Businesses wouldn't have to front taxes that they wouldn't be getting back under the tax freeze plan anyway. Our plan also leaves it to the local community in a bottom-up way to decide, do we want to get to the cap? Do we want to keep our levy at the cap? Knowing that if they do, there's this further reward of property tax relief coming from the state. But rather than a one-size-fits-all formula for shared services, let's allow local governments, school districts in their communities, they're closest to the people, local governments. We hear that all the time here in Albany. If local governments are closest to the people, let them work it out with their residents what they want to do in terms of setting their tax policy. I allude to this already, but this is a much more collaborative approach. That's why we're here to say to the state, we want to work with you to get to property tax relief, rather than creating basically a new mandate, this shared service formula that doesn't recognize what's already happened in terms of shared services at the local level. Rather than a mandate, let's have a collaborative approach. We also think, as Tim alluded to, our plan is, well, let's put it this way. The tax freeze plan would freeze not only would it freeze taxes, hopefully, it would freeze any movement towards shared services for the next 3 years, because local governments will not get any credit for sharing any services they've done already or between now and 2017 when they start implementing their shared service plans. This encourages our people to, all the things they're doing right now, it encourages them to do more of it and to continue it now. So we think those are the fundamental differences of why our plan would get everybody in the capital to where they want to be, which is comprehensive property tax relief for residents and businesses all across the state. Finally, we're going to have Steve Aquario speak, talk a bit about mandate relief and our municipal innovation exchange. Steve?
Thank you, Peter. So as you've heard today, New York's local governments are asking the New York State Legislature for their help. We need the New York State Legislature to weigh in on this issue to help local governments help their local taxpayers. Let me start by saying that we as the local government representatives stand with the governor. We stand with the state legislature to reduce the cost of government. However, to illustrate the unintended consequence of this property tax freeze proposal, if this law were in place today, in 2014, most of the homeowners and businesses in 10 New York counties would not have received any rebate for their county taxes. This is because these counties either cut the levy or didn't increase it. And this represents nearly 33% of the entire population outside of New York City. Obviously, this isn't fair. All the homeowners, and as you've heard from Peter Baines, all the businesses need property tax relief, and that's part of the reason we're here today. And that is to provide an alternative. As Peter Baines mentioned, we are pleased today to be leading by example. Today, New York's counties, cities, villages, towns, and school districts lead by example and are announcing the formation of the Municipal Innovation Exchange, or the MIX. This MIX will provide thousands of shared services initiatives that are successfully underway at the present time. What we have collectively discovered is that some local governments and school districts may not be aware of what each other are doing, even within the same county, let alone from areas all across this state. This mix will fill that gap and save local taxpayers money. In addition to the mix, the 4 statewide associations have come together to provide regional forums all across the state to provide these shared services initiatives directly to the communities and the school districts. Over the long run, though, in order to get a handle on property taxes in New York, we need to understand the cost drivers of what's causing the property tax. State programs such as Medicaid, public assistance, welfare, preschool special education are funded with local taxes in New York. This is not the case in other states. This is part of the reason we have some of the highest property taxes in the country, and we remain committed to working with the governor and the legislature to addressing these issues. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve, and thank you for your patience. With that, we'll open it up to any questions you may have, to any of us or all of us.